Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artist Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. And now, here's our host for today's podcast, Max Wickemeyer.
Well, good morning, beautiful New Bedford, Massachusetts. We're seated at the Pod Room at the Spectrum Marketing Group studio, the host of the South Coast Artist Index podcast series, which shares about 243 stories of the creative networking of artists in the South Coast. And today we'll be meeting David Poyant, a decorative artist whose experience of the South Coast, his professional experience such as expert technical training apprentices in the time-honored craft that he'll talk about. Further, David took his time-honored craft in a creative talent as in a unique process of stitching the colors and lines of fabric to paint images by his sewing method. Viewers of David's are surprised, dazzled, and entranced by the surface complexity that David produces in his art. David presents a market-driven sales approach to his art sales, including an attractive and easy-to-use website. David is showing his art constantly, and perhaps we'll learn more about his 2 invitations to the Smithsonian Crafts Show. I expect our time will fly by with inspirational stories and entertaining approaches to an artistic life. Well, welcome David Poyant to the South Coast Artist Index.
Well, good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really very excited about this. I met you about a year and a half ago at an art gallery, and I keep running into you at art galleries in the South Coast. And
scary, isn't it?
Well, it's amazing. It is. It's scary in terms of your production and your work ethic and your focus on really getting your art out into the public scene and the enjoyment of that. I think not only do participants enjoy your art, I think you enjoy the sharing it.
I do. I mean, as you've learned, I'm not very shy about talking about my pieces and that stuff, and so any place that I can kind of go and talk to people and see the reaction. My biggest problem and intent at the same time was I wanted my pieces to become. When somebody was looking at one of my pieces, I wanted them to think that it was an oil painting. Mm-hmm. The problem is people walk by and they'll go, "Oh, nice painting," mm-hmm. and they'll keep on walking type thing. And I kind of have to pull them back to, mm-hmm. get them to realize that it's actually done in thread and not in, oil or watercolors,
which creates a surprise on the part of the viewer once they realize that really intricate image is not painted, it's sewn, it's stitched, which is amazing. Before we go into that, which we will be going into some detail, just as a background, David, if you could share with us your biography, where you were born, where you were raised, the neighborhoods, your schools, and then we can get into your professional background.
Okay. Well, born and raised in north end of New Bedford.
Touche.
That's it. My father owned Poyant shoe stores, which was on Acushnet Avenue, in the North End. And I probably started working for him when I was 11, 12 years old. As far as schools, that's kind of simple because I went to St. Anthony Grammar School, started at in kindergarten over there, and the way St. Anthony was set up is as you stepped up the stairs, you went into the higher grades until you finally made it into high school, which they had the high school in the same building. And so I kind of went from kindergarten right through 12th grade, right at St. Anthony. So I had the nuns the entire time I was at
And how
school.
did you have the nuns?
Well, I mean, at first, I mean, when I first started, there was no, the only teachers that they had inside the school were all nuns. So when we finally got up to the high school level, we had some, individual, people, teaching over there. But most of the time, I dealt with the nuns all the way through.
Okay, so I've never experienced a nun as a teacher.
Oh boy, you've
what-
really missed out.
what is the main this?
Well, I mean, first of all, especially I want to say second, third, and fourth. St. Anthony was obviously Catholic school, but it was mostly French. So we spent the morning,
Are you bilingual?
I should be, but I'm not.
You were?
I mean, let's put it this way: my grandparents. I'm number 10 out of 11 kids. Okay. My grandmother and grandfather lived with my father. I don't know how many years, but they refused to speak anything but French.
Okay.
So my older brothers and sisters, if they wanted to speak to Meme and Pepe, they had to speak French. Now, they passed away probably about 2 or 3 years before I was born. So that whole thing stopped inside the house. So if you don't use it, you lose it, type thing. So by the time I came around, the last, I want to say, 4 of us of the kids, we weren't speaking French at the house. So I can understand it. Right now, 9 times out of 10, if somebody's speaking to me in French, I know what they're saying, but I'm not bilingual. I mean, that's...
Now, you got into the family profession fairly early on in your professional career.
Yeah.
And tell me about that, please.
Well, my, like I said, probably, I want to say 11, 12 years old, all the boys in the family at one point worked at the shoe store. There was probably 3 of us that got into the shoe repair aspect of it. The rest of them just sold, worked the retail. And I was always good with my hands, so I kind of went into the shoe repair end, and I was basically the stitcher. So anything that had to be sewn in repairing the shoes, that was my forte.
Okay. Did you manage the customer sales as well as...
Yeah, I did both,
So you're doing customer service,
It's customer service,
cash management,
yeah,
in and out.
Well, yeah. I mean, taking care of sales and all that stuff.
And at what age?
Oh boy, I mean, by that time I was probably, 13, 14 years old.
Okay.
But all of my high school years, I was definitely at the store, every day.
Was it fun?
I enjoyed it. I mean, I've always enjoyed, as you can tell, I'm very shy and I have a hard time talking. And so, but I always had, I enjoyed working with the customers and talking and that stuff. So that part there was good.
Later in your professional career as a what would you say your profession was? A shoe repair,
cobbler. Yeah,
cobbler.
cobbler.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I did that for probably 35 years.
as part of that, we talked about your working with apprentices to train.
Right.
And tell me a little about that experience, please.
When I left the shoe store, there was a company out of Weymouth, Mass, called LaRosse's Instant Shoe Repair, and he was just at the beginning stages of setting up a shoe repair franchise company. So I ended up doing a lot of the training for a lot of the people that were looking at franchise, shoe repair franchise business. A lot of them didn't have any background in shoe repair at all. Plus, the employees that were going to be working at their stores all needed to be trained. And so I kind of took them from A to Z on what had to be done, in shoe repair franchise.
So did you design the training programs and then execute them?
Yeah, pretty much. Mm-hmm. Pretty much so.
And how many people did you work under your tutelage? Approximately.
Oh boy, approximately I want to say 35.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, somewhere in that range, because I mean we ended up having 15 locations. I was, I kind of told you the other day, I was a grand babysitter. So if anybody had any questions on how to do anything, I was the one that they kind of went to figure it out.
I would call him a subject matter expert.
That's it. That's what you had said.
Yeah. Fantastic. I mean, and to be in that role, you're developing people. You're learning different approaches for motivation,
and you learn something new from everybody that you work with too, because it's not like I had a given rule that everybody had to go by. I mean, a lot of times you're looking at the same thing as that I do with the pieces now. You don't have to follow a given, stitch to be able to come out, with a finished piece. Same thing with shoe repair. Same thing with this stuff here.
There's different ways of going through.
There's different ways of getting to. You have a finished goal that you want to get to. Mm-hmm. In regards to the shoe repair, you had to take the shoes apart. Anything that can be taken apart can be put back together again. Mm-hmm. So it's just really a matter of knowing some basic rules of how you want the finished piece to be, mm-hmm. and then take it from there.
Well, I think what also you brought to the table is your ability to interact with the customer successfully to learn their expectations. You can then plan how do you repair, and then you create the process for success.
Yeah,
and I think that in a way maybe if we can sort of transition to how we got to your art. I understand you retired.
I retired.
Okay.
I spent my final years over at Lowe's in the paint department at Lowe's. So
well, how does that fit in?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, you're dealing with dealing with colors and everything else. Mm-hmm. The shoe repair business over the years, just kind of fizzled out. I mean, you can go out and buy a pair of shoes for $50, and you weren't necessarily going to spend $75 or $80 repairing your old shoes. So that, in itself, now in what started out as probably 13 different cobblers working in the New Bedford area, I think there's one left. So the business wasn't there anymore. So I was kind of looking for something else to do. They hadn't even opened up the store in North Dartmouth yet over at Lowe's. And so I went in there not hoping they wouldn't hire me. Just basically because, that wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do, but that was supposed to hold me over until I found out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And then, I don't know, 15, 20 years later, I retired. I retired from there. Still hadn't found what I wanted to do with the rest of my life yet.
Well, we'll all work on figuring that out.
So, yeah.
But it's all a journey and process. Moving to the creative aspects of what you, let me back up on that. From what this conversation, what leads me to believe is that you had a creative impulse and you had creative directions through your whole life and applied creativity to different aspects.
Yeah, but I never really thought of myself as an artist.
Sure.
Yes, the shoe repair was my tie-in to the creative side.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned to you the other day about John Silber.
Who is John Silber?
Yeah, John Silber was the president over at Boston University.
He thought himself much more than just a university president.
Oh yeah,
but he was a very successful university president.
He ran for governor.
He ran for governor
at one point.
Yeah,
and he came in when I was working over at LaRosse's. He came into the shop one day, and he knew. Now, John Silber had some birth defects, but he knew that if he positioned his foot in a certain angle, raised up his heel, a certain way. I mean, he knew right down to the, millimeter. If I put myself in this position, I'm not in pain. He said, so he came in, he had it all written down. It was exactly, what he needed. He said, can you do this for me? And I told him, I said, you made it easy because I said all the information is right there. So he said, so you can do it. And I said, yeah. So he left me a couple of pairs of shoes. Came back, a couple of days later to pick them up, and we tried them on, and he was 100% correct in what he needed. And so he told me at the time, he said, he says, I've spoken to half a dozen different people. He said most of them wouldn't even try because they think that they could. And he says the ones that did try, never, was able to accomplish it. He said first time out, he says, you've got it. And I said, well, like I said, you made it easy. So just, at the time, my mind is always kind of going. And I says, well, look, you've got Boston University, you're connected with all the hospitals, you've got the orthopedic surgeons. Wouldn't it be nice to have an orthopedic shoe department at BU? And he says, yeah, it would be nice. So I went home that night, wrote up a 3-page proposal, and mailed it into him. And he calls me up, a few days later. He says, I want to talk to you about the letter you sent in. And I said, okay, fine. And so I went into his office. It was just me and him. And he says, we're going to go into the other room. He says, no promises. I just want to talk to you about, what you would put in the letter. And I said, okay, fine. I walked into the other room, and he brought together the board of directors at Boston University to talk about this orthopedic shoe department over at BU. And luckily, basically with all the conversation was based on what I knew, in shoe repair. And so we were there for, half hour, 45 minutes, and I was answering questions from all the different people on the board and all that stuff. Now, I just have to, kind of take a sidestep for a second. I graduated from St. Anthony, high school. Okay, never went to college. So I was kind of out of my realm.
Well, you felt you were,
yeah.
but you were right in the meeting with the board of directors and the president, and you were holding your own.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I could. Well, like I said, as long as they kept on that subject matter,
okay.
I was fine.
Subject matter expert.
So yeah. So he, at the end of the meeting, he kind of looked over and to his second in charge and said, "Okay, do it." So, and John Silber, basically, when it came to he had final word on everything at the university. So, whatever John Silber wanted, John Silber got. And so it was always kind of considered a 3-year, project for them. So at the end of the 3-year, I think he would have continued it. The guy that I was reporting to over at the college didn't necessarily want me there from day one, but as long as Silber wanted it. But it was kind of considered one of Silber's whims, and so it ended after 3 years, and that's when I kind of fell into the well, actually, I had a side step before I got into Lowe's. What was it? One of the senilities setting in, because I can't think of the name of the shoe company.
Tom McCann.
No, of course, I'll think of it. I'll think of it afterwards. But yeah, well, yeah, one of the shoe companies I went to work at, and they were opening a series of shoe kiosks. We had we ended up opening, I want to say, 10 different locations for them. So it's very similar to what I did for LaRossa's Instant Shoe Repair. I did for them, and we opened up 10 different locations, and then so I was the grand babysitter for that.
Well, I don't want to discount what you grand babysitter. You were head manager. You were administrating.
Yeah. I mean,
so
for them,
I was responsibility.
I was finding the locations. So I had to go out and they were focusing. We did a store, Born Shoes. I'm sorry, Born Shoes.
Thank you.
We did a location on Thames Street in Newport, but we had, I want to say, 6 or 7 different mall locations that we set up kiosks in, and so I would go in, hire, over there I would hire the people, train them, but training them, it was mainly training them on the retail end. So I mean, we're they had a very comfortable. I think they're still around. To tell you the truth, I don't see them. All of the locations that we opened up, they ended up closing. But
what I hear is a can-do attitude, a willingness to take some risks, to do what's needed to get the job done.
Yeah.
And that seems like just a consistent kind of pattern for your life stories.
Yeah.
Is really challenges, meeting the challenges head on, not questioning, but saying, how can I do it, and making it happen. And not only making it happen in a really specific professional technique, but you're using all your other skills as well, your human relation skills, your ability to deal with people successfully, to stay positive when it's rough. I mean, I'm sure that there's so many episodes that were challenging, and you faced them head on.
Yeah, I mean, you that's welcome to life.
Well,
I mean,
this is welcome to life of I think a successful creative person. Okay, and you I think you certainly have the right to say that based on your experience and where you're at currently. So you really have this you've honored this fully.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were opening up those other shoe stores, and that came to an end. How did you start going from really a functional type of a product, which would be the shoes, the orthopedic creations that you made, right? Because these aren't just not
right.
shoe repair. You're putting together boots to enable ambulation of
right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the time when the Born shoe situation, I was just kind of looking for what the next phase in my life was going to be, and they were opening up the store in North Dartmouth, and over at Lowe's. So that was just going to be a temporary situation until I figured out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So walked in there one day, kind of hoping that they, my wife wanted me to find something, something to do. And so I went in there. They
Keep you out of trouble.
Keep me out of trouble. This was probably maybe a month. They were just starting to do the setup of the shelves and racking and all that stuff. So I went in there, and they kind of on the funny side, they put me in millwork to work the millwork department. Now, I knew nothing about millwork or doors and windows and all that stuff, and the guy that was running that department said, don't worry about it, we'll train you. So about 2 months after him starting to train me in millwork, it was decided that I'd do better in the paint department. So I moved over to the paint department. Now, at least in paint, I knew about colors and that aspect of it. So I did much better, in the paint department than I did in millwork. And, then I was there, like I said, for 20 years.
And how did that? So did the paint was it work with the paint department directly contributory towards your creating these stitch art pieces?
No.
Tell me how did you get
really
started in this?
Well, when I was getting ready to retire over at Lowe's, I was looking for something to keep my hands busy. Now, my mother passed away, I want to say 45 years ago. And one of the main memories that I have of my mother was her sitting in her chair, every night, every day. And her hands were always stitching something. She did embroidery, she did knitting, she did cross stitching. But she was always, stitching something. And, I was thinking about it one day, and, I look at some of the pieces that she did, and she did some beautiful work. I mean,
such as?
My sister, my sister has this one piece that I don't even know what it's called. What the technique is called, but it's flowers and leaves, and I mean just absolutely beautiful. The dimensions on the piece was absolutely incredible. I've got a couple of different pieces that landscape pieces, and I want to say one of them is a lighthouse that my son has at his house. So everybody in the family has some piece that my mother did for them at one point in her life.
Was she a professional?
No.
Okay.
Nope. Just basically the way I think she just kind of picked it up on her own. And
was she in any school or?
Nope. Well, not that I know of.
Okay. No finishing school.
No.
So the sewing probably was through the family.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Likely.
I mean, just like I said, she just kind of was always stitching. So I just kind of thought to myself, yeah, I can do that. Mm-hmm. So I went out that day, bought some, embroidery thread and some needles, and the stretches. The most of the time, most of the embroidery, people that I've seen, they use the loops. So I picked up a couple of loops and all that stuff, but I didn't want to, basically just do the loops with, welcome home, type thing on it. I kind of pictured wanting to do the, a portrait type piece, that like I'm doing now. And so that, I went out and made picked up a larger stretcher, but then that wasn't quite big enough for the pieces that I wanted to do. So I ended up making my own stretchers to
So you did get into mill work.
I did get into mill.
Finally,
in a way.
Yeah, in a way. Being successful.
But
we're looking at a decorative piece of yours, David. We'll introduce it. It's in our pod room here, and it's beautiful. It's a very nice frame too that surrounds the piece. So, how did your creations get out to the public once you started making your art?
Well, once I started online, they have Call for Artists, and that is, well, actually the first show that I ever did was at the New Bedford Art Museum, and Suzanne told me, after the fact type thing, that it doesn't necessarily work out that way. But I walked in that day. I had like 2 or 3 pieces with me, and so I walked in. Suzanne was there. We talked for about 15 minutes.
Was that cold call? Did you show up unannounced?
Unannounced. Just kind of walked in one day, and so, like I said, I had 2 or 3 pieces with me, and we talked for about 15 minutes, and she says, would you be, interested in doing a show? First she says, how many pieces do you have? And I says, well, probably 8 to 10. And she says, would you be interested in doing a show over here? And what am I going to do? Say no? And so, I said yes. And, so we ended up doing, the first show that I ever did was over at the New Bedford Art Museum. And they have what they call, I think it's called the Vault, where, they have, their main studio right there. And then they have one big room and then a small room that's on the side of it. So I had the small room.
Was that the vault?
The vault.
Okay. And the vault is a bank vault, correct?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
When the building was a bank itself, before the museum took it over, it was a bank. But
at one time, there was a lot of money in New Bedford.
Right.
Okay. We don't.
Well, I'm told that there still is but
somewhere.
I don't know.
It's not in the banks, I
Right.
guess. So.
But so I had that room there, and what we were kind of talking, I think we mentioned it at one point. Whenever they had a show, like the openings or all that stuff, I made sure that I was there, because if somebody was kind of walking by, there was like, you could see one piece. So you had to kind of drag the people into the room for them to look at, all the different pieces. And they would kind of walk by and they'd say, "Oh, nice painting," and then keep walking. And so I knew it was, even at that point there, I was getting the pieces to be photorealistic. So for them not to know that it was embroidery, you had to kind of drag them into the room.
Wonderful.
So I would, interact with the people as they were walking by. And
You're so shy too.
yes, I am. I have such a hard time talking. I mean,
and interacting with people.
yeah. So
you pulled them into the vault?
I pulled them into the vault, and obviously the whole the look on their face, and everything changes when they realize that it's not a painting. And even at the Smithsonian this year, the exact same thing was happening. People were walking by the table and they were saying, "Oh, nice painting," until on the sign it just said fiber art. Mm-hmm. Once they saw fiber art and they realized that it wasn't an oil painting, their whole their whole demeanor changed.
And this is, I think, part of the success and the effectiveness of your art, is that it is so unique in terms of the way you put it together and the unique impressions you get when you look at the piece, because especially as you approach it, you can see the distinctions of the lines and the colors that you've laid out on the piece, and it just gives a whole nother level of sort of a tactile impression with your eyes, that it surprises people when they see what it is.
Yeah. And
I think that's one real exciting aspect of your art, and it surprises people and it dazzles people. So this is part of what creates the excitement that you've made with your pieces. Now, let me think. So you started the art museum with this show.
Yeah.
And how did you feel about that?
Well, I mean, I was thrilled. I really appreciate Suzanne giving me, my first opportunity.
Did you make sales?
You can't sell any pieces at the museum.
Okay.
It's just strictly, display only.
Did it create
Now,
leads?
It did create leads,
Okay.
and I've got initially I've sold before the Smithsonian show. I sold probably, I want to say 6 to 8 pieces, but I pick on my wife all the time. She doesn't quite understand, why everybody is so excited over the piece. So she's always, especially in the beginning phase, she thought the pieces were worth about $25 a piece, and that stuff. So I had, when I was still working at Lowe's, I had a lady come in and we started talking. I don't know how we got into the art stuff, but come to find out, she did internet marketing for artists. And I was spending 25 hours, on an individual piece at the time. So, my wife was saying they're worth about $25 a piece. And I says, okay, so what should I be selling these pieces for? And she says, well, you start at $100 an hour. And she says, looking at the quality of the work that I'm seeing, you go $100 an hour and you go up from there. And I said, so you're telling me that I should be selling these things for, $2,000 and not $25? And she says, absolutely yes. She said, the quality is there. So, she said, so you go up from there. So, the pieces that I sold in the, New Bedford area, the market in New Bedford is much harder. And so when I went into the Smithsonian, that was the first time that I was really able to sell pieces for what they were recommending that I sell them for.
And there's a website. You have a fantastic website, so I encourage everyone to look at the website, see the art, and look at the price point, because the price points, I think, are very reasonable for the work that you put in and the quality of work. But I think most importantly, you seem satisfied with not only your artistic production, you seem satisfied with your artistic marketing outcome.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, it all comes down to marketing. And I mean, it doesn't matter, which artist. I mean, there are tons of artists in the New Bedford area that I never even knew about, 4 years ago. And there are, South Coast Marketing, group, the artist over at Gallery X and that stuff. And there are just tons of artists, and everybody has the same problem, is in selling their pieces.
Sure.
And so, it still comes down to how you do the marketing. So what I started to get into a little earlier, there are call for artists all over the internet. And so I started looking into the different calls, and I joke around saying that I'm more famous in Europe and Canada than I am here in the United States.
Well, tell me why.
Well, because especially the group in Canada, and I kind of...
What group in Canada?
There's... I'm probably in... Bifinnial is one. There's probably about 6 or 7 different art magazines that every time I would submit a piece into it, I got in. automatically, and not only got into the and published in their magazines, but I probably ended up taking first place or second place, in the pieces, to the point where at one point I was thinking, okay, this has got to be a scam type situation, because I knew I liked my stuff, but I mean, it was like every single time I submitted, I was, winning something. And it was like, okay, but then after the fact, when I started looking at the pieces that were, getting into either the magazines and all that stuff, they were all oil paintings, they were all watercolors, they were, some,
The tried and true classical techniques,
right,
that you don't do.
That I don't do.
Yeah.
So I said, maybe they kind of like what they're seeing, type thing. So, and the same thing was happening in Europe. I kept getting invited to go to Barcelona, to Italy. And so I ended up sending, right now I have 3 pieces that's doing, It's Liquid is a group. They're based in, I want to say they're based in Paris, but they have museums all over Europe that they own. So they're making their way through 3 of the different museums. So, I'm kind of well represented in, in Europe. And, like I said, the same thing in Canada. I took first place. Well, actually, I shared first place with another artist in a magazine in Canada. The Venue magazine, has my work in it. I'm gonna kind of the piece that's in that magazine. My oldest son Ryan, at the time, was stationed in Africa, and he was the city that they were in. He was the Maasai tribe was doing the security work for for the town that Ryan was stationed in at the time. And so he ends up meeting the king of the Maasai, becomes very close friends with them. He because Ryan had done 3 tours over in Iraq, he was considered a warrior. So they invited him to be part of the warrior tribe of the Maasai tribe. And so he calls me up one day and he says, "Dad, I just want you to know," he says, "I'm officially a moron." And I said, "Okay, that's you're not telling me anything new, but why are you calling?" type thing. He says, "Well, the morons are the Maasai. A Maasai warrior is actually called a moron. So I am now officially a part of the Maasai tribe." And so, I asked him, I said, when the warriors are doing the security for the town, he says, "Are they walking around with, guns or, rifles or what?" He says, "Oh no." He says, "Blow darts." and he says, and they're not a very big, tall. My son is like 6'3", so he's a big boy, and he towers over, his fellow warriors. But he says there isn't a single one of them that I would want to take, take on, one-on-one. He says, they would all be able to take me down with no problem. He said, but he says, I'm officially part of the tribe now, and so
Tell me how that comes around to your art.
the artwork. Well, when Ryan had told me the story of the Maasai tribe and him being part of the Maasai tribe now, I designed 4 different pieces that were based off of Maasai art. And, I've got the Maasai, their tents and their, habitat. I've got, the Queen of the Maasai. I've got one piece that's the Maasai warriors.
And one of your pieces I've seen it's just incredibly, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's
a portrait of a Maasai warrior,
Yeah.
I believe.
And we ended up gifting those pieces to Patrick, who's the king of the Maasai. So where they're hanging, I don't know whether they're at his house or if they have a specific.
What an honor, though, to produce your art and share it with people across the world.
Yeah, well,
and have it displayed, in a place that's so different than New Bedford.
Well,
it's just it's amazing.
On the, I did Paul Santos does a podcast or a TV show, and the mayor was there the night that I was there, and I had which piece was it? It was the New Bedford. Basically, it's the New Bedford fisherman, sitting at a bar having a drink. I had that piece, so I ended up giving. So that's hanging in the office, in the mayor's office in New Bedford now.
Wonderful.
So, I've got pieces at different. I've got.
I would call them. You have art displayed in very distinctive places.
Yeah.
Of honor. So.
Yeah. Well, I liked. I was very appreciated that the mayor was interested enough to be able to hang my piece in.
Well, your creativity produced this.
Yeah.
So it's really, again, it's a testament to what you bring to the earth, to our community.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's like I said, I don't tend to be very shy, so I figure the most they can say is no, and.
Well, you could have been the same way and created crappy art.
Well, this
but you know what I'm saying. But and been assertive. But
Yeah.
You have marketed your art, and it's beautiful work. So you've really put a couple of things together quite well. The way that you work quite hard to market your art. What impresses me, in addition to this, is when you present your art in galleries, which you are there, like we talked about. You're at the vault. You're showing people, hey, go around the corner and see the other stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And
like I said, it all comes down to marketing.
Well, it all comes down to marketing, and you have this booklet in your display. So you have a booklet that is multi pages. It's full pages of your art, your different descriptions, references to your art magazines, your awards, the places you've gone. Those are detailed in your book.
Yeah.
in the gallery. And that is really, these are the different aspects, the different facets of bringing your work to the public.
Yeah.
And also, you're not complaining about how come I can't get the art out there. You're just getting the art there out there, and then it's being received.
Well, I keep bringing up Suzanne.
Yeah.
Over at
That's great.
the art museum. We're doing a show in October for the blind, where they're going to be able to come in and touch all the individual pieces and that stuff. But obviously Suzanne knows a lot of people, in the art world. And she had meant last time we talked, she was saying that, I'm going to introduce you to this person and that person. And usually when somebody says I'm going to introduce you to Max, I have a tendency of going out and contacting them and that stuff. And she says, no, she says, she says, you walking in here that one day, she says, that's how it isn't how it normally happens. She says, let me do my thing. She says, they're going to be coming to the show in October. I don't know if I'm going to be here in October, so she kind of had to pull me back a little bit from how I would normally do it, but she wants to make the introductions herself.
And I just want to reinforce that this is an aspect of your flexibility too. I mean, you have a plan and a mission, and you get a little feedback. Maybe we should do it a little differently, and you're already adjusting and the new step. So that flexibility is really an awesome quality. Now we did talk about a connection to the blind in addition. Share that.
My mother used to be part in New Bedford. They had a group called the Blind Guild, and they met once a month, and most of the members, there was a group that weren't blind. My mother, was not, but they helped, did fundraising for what was going on, with these members that, that were sight impaired. And, for probably 4 or 5 years during my high school years and right after that, I did, I was, for their Christmas party, every year I was Santa who went in and, dressed up and put the beard on. And so I was Santa at the Blind Guild meeting.
Did they touch your face a lot?
Well, yeah. Probably, yes.
Pull the beard off?
Probably, yes. But like I said, I did that for a few years. So when I had a couple of pieces showing, at the art museum, and Suzanne had a group going through, and I get a phone call. We were away, and she says, I've got a group going through. She says, is it okay if they want to touch the piece? And the thing is, most of the galleries that you go into, customers, people are going through, and they all have their hands behind their back and looking at the piece. And I tell them, you can touch them. And they go, oh, no, you're not allowed to touch. I said, no, I'm the artist. I said, you're allowed to, to touch the piece. So I've never had any, problem with people going up and actually touching the pieces. So that brought up the idea of, she says, do you want to do a show for the blind? And I said, definitely yes. So I had started putting a lot of my pieces, what I consider my older pieces, my 4-year-old pieces, behind glass. So all my newer stuff now is
Open,
and they can, I've got 2 pieces right now over at Gallery X, and like I said, we were there for the opening night, and I was there, and I was talking to one lady that everybody. I haven't had anybody tell me that they don't like what they see so far.
wonderful.
But this one lady was walking by, and I just I love the expressions when they realize that it's not a painting, because she was walking by and she was looking at it, and her whole expression just kind of exploded. And so I had to excuse myself for a second. I says, I love that. She says, you're the artist? And I said, yeah. She says, it's not a painting? I said, no, it's not a painting. She said, oh my God.
Fantastic.
And, so that's what I kind of feed off of.
Well, that's such a wonderful story to really describe the effects of visitors who see your art, and they are dazzled, they're entranced, they're surprised. So kudos, David, for the work that you're doing, and kudos to the continued work you're going to continue to do. And at this point, we are really getting close to wrap-up time here. Yeah. But I want to leave an opportunity for you to share any projects, dreams, plans, anything we haven't covered to add. This is your really open time before we wrap it up.
Well, like I said, in October, we've got 2 shows going on. One at Douglas Gallery at Gallery X, and the other show at the New Bedford Art Museum.
Fantastic.
So we've got that going on.
2 shows at the same time?
At the same time.
All right,
I
man.
didn't necessarily realize that at the time, but
you say yes first.
Yeah, you always say yes, and then you realize, okay, I need extra pieces, type thing.
And you'll do it.
And I've got most of them pretty much set up. I'm number 10 out of 11 kids. So all of my brothers and sisters have all grabbed different pieces from me. So I may be borrowing some of those pieces, to show at like I said, at the New Bedford Art Museum. You can't sell anything there. So I've had,
and I think Gallery X has a little stamp for not for sale.
Well, you have a you have the option of either putting it not for sale or for sale.
But if your brothers and sisters, they might agree if the price
was right. Yeah, exactly. And so that's if I have to borrow a couple of pieces to kind of fill in the gaps,
you got it covered.
I've got it covered. So I've got probably enough pieces to put 8 to 10 pieces in each location. So my problem is going to be, where do I physically, go? I'm going to have to be at the locations.
You're going to need an assistant.
Yeah, exactly. I've got, while I was at the Smithsonian, one of the girls that works on the committee, I was talking to her, and she said, well, you are coming back next year, right? And I said, well, because you have to go through a vetting process to get in, to the show. And I said, well, I'm going to submit. She said, no, you are coming back next year, right? And I said, well, okay, I'll definitely come back, So I will get to, come back.
Super. And I can't wait to hear how you do at the Smithsonian next time.
Yeah.
But the Gallery X is coming up, as well as the New Bedford Art Museum. So we're gonna have a good opportunity this year locally to see more of your art displayed.
Yeah, exactly.
Super. Anything else before we wrap it up?
I don't know. Did you want to tell the story about the Smithsonian, or
I don't think we have enough time. I think we might have to put that on hold for maybe another podcast sometime, maybe later in the year, and hear how you did.
Okay. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's good.
Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the South Coast Artist Index podcast. For more information, please visit theartistindex.com.